Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Here's one of those stories that got sent to me by basically everyone. This one has it all. And actually, it was sent to me probably by 30 or 40 different people. Thank you very much. People sent to me from all different kinds of publications where it was run. And so I went online and tried to find a more centralized location to find the story so we wouldn't get any spin from locals or whatever. And so this is from the ABA Journal, the American Bar Association Journal. 3 judges face ethics charges in White Castle shooting that injured 2 of them. But what sparked the confrontation? And that's not the only question I have, and I'm sure you got questions too. What were the judges doing getting in a shootout in a White Castle parking lot? This story just spells class all the way across, right? Deborah Cassens-Weiss wrote the story for the ABA Journal. And it all went down in Indiana, where an Indiana judge raised her middle finger at 2 men who yelled something from an SUV before the men became involved in a fight outside a White Castle with 2 of her fellow judges. This is all according to ethics complaints filed recently against all 3 judges. And this is one of those things where, assuming there's even a grain of truth to any of this, they should all be off the bench. The judge accused of raising her finger is Sabrina Bell of Crawford County. And the judges accused of fighting with the 2 men are Andrew Adams and Bradley Jacobs of Clark County. Adams and Jacobs were shot and seriously injured in the confrontation. And I've mentioned this before, that attorneys and judges are held to a standard of behavior, even when they're not in a courtroom. Judges in particular are always supposed to be on their best behavior, such that they don't even give the appearance of impropriety. And so it seems to me that flipping people off in a White Castle restaurant parking lot to the point where a shootout occurs and other judges get shot, there's something going on here. Not just the appearance, but something. The Indianapolis Star and the NWI.com sites have coverage, and there's all kinds of coverage. Just run the phrase 3 judges White Castle, and you will get the same story I did. The 3 judges were in Indianapolis for a judicial conference the day of the fight. They had visited several bars before going to White Castle in the early morning hours of May 1st. Oh, there's so much wrong with that sentence. In September, Adams pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery for kicking the alleged gunman and was sentenced to 365 days in jail. And again, remember, that's Judge Andrew Adams. The other judges were not criminally charged. The alleged gunman, Brandon Kaiser, and his nephew, Alfredo Vasquez, are facing felony and misdemeanor battery charges in the fight. Kaiser faces the more serious felony charges, including level 3 felony aggravated assault, according to the Indianapolis Star. According to the ethics complaints. So again, remember, something happens in the parking lot and there's crimes happening. Okay? And it's not up to us to sort that out. That's the police and the prosecutors and so on, and eventually judges. But there's a criminal activity alleged, right? But what happened here is somebody alleged that the judges were behaving unethically. And remember, their behavior is not gauged by just what happens within the 4 walls of their courtroom. Their behavior is judged by how they behave everywhere. So if they go out in public and do something that goes too far, they can get in trouble with the ethics people for doing something in public that did not happen in a courtroom, even though they're not wearing a judge's robe or anything like that. So the ethics complaints say things like, Vasquez and Kaiser parked their SUV after Bell gave them the finger. And by the way, that right there might be enough for an ethics complaint. The judge flipped me off. A heated verbal altercation began with all participants yelling, including using profanity, and making dismissive, mocking, or insolent gestures towards the other group, according to the ethics complaint. Mocking or insolent gestures toward the other group. Adams and Jacobs then started moving toward Kaiser and Vasquez, and a physical confrontation ensued, according to the ethics complaint. During most of the confrontation, Adams and Vasquez were hitting and kicking each other, according to the ethics complaint. Several times the contact would dissipate, then the 2 men would begin fighting again. You have that happen where the 2 children are scrapping, you pull them apart, you let them go, and it's like, woo, right back together again. You pull them apart, and woo, right back together again. Jacobs and Kaiser primarily wrestled with each other on the ground. At one point, Jacobs had his fist raised and remarked, "We're done or this is over." So, you think about a judicial conference in Indianapolis, and you think to yourself, there'll be, some lectures and some presentations and, maybe some roundtable discussions and maybe some good old-fashioned wrestling in a White Castle parking lot at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, isn't that, if you saw the agenda. I spoke about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, at the National Association of Attorneys General down in Florida. And I was on the agenda. And it actually said, private attorney Steve Lehto is going to come in and speak about car buying issues. And the audience was filled with people from attorney general's offices around the country, attorneys general. And I saw the agenda. I mean, I didn't attend the whole conference. It was a 2-day conference. I was there for 1 day. I saw a couple things, but, then I presented. But I'm pretty sure that wrestling in the parking lot of the White Castle at 1 a.m. was not on their agenda. Okay, so when you ask yourself, is there really something going on here that really is a problem that we really need to look at? Really, I don't think you have to ask yourself that question. I think when you simply say the phrase that the judges were wrestling in a White Castle parking lot at 1 a.m., there's a problem. So Vasquez came over and tried to get Jacobs off Kaiser. Jacobs began to get up, and Vasquez started a physical fight with Jacobs, the complaints say. With Jacobs off him, Kaiser began to get up, and at that point, the complaint says, Adams came over and kicked Kaiser in the back. I believe that's how men fight. You walk up and you try to get behind your opponent, and you kick him in the back. Kaiser then allegedly pulled out his gun and shot Adams in the stomach. Kaiser then went over to Jacobs and allegedly fired 2 more shots, striking Jacobs in the chest, according to complaints. Bell told police at the scene that she felt like the fight was all her fault, although she later told police in recorded statements that she didn't know what sparked the confrontation, the ethics complaint says. All 3 judges are accused of failing to act in a manner that promotes public confidence in the judiciary and engaging in extrajudicial activity that undermines the judge's integrity. Adams is also accused of failing to comply with the law. So, again, in case you're curious, and we'll go back up now, because remember there's 3 judges, and it appears it's 1 woman and 2 men, Sabrina Bell, Andrew Adams, and Bradley Jacobs. So when we get to the back and it says Bell told police at the scene she felt like the fight was her fault, although she later told police she didn't know what sparked the confrontation. That's going to be another problem, because it would seem that what started the confrontation was the judge flipping off an SUV with some people in it who apparently had guns. And now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of blame to be spread around here. And I'm assuming that the wheels of justice will come into play here. And again, if there were crimes, prosecutions and trials and things of that nature. But we're talking about the ethical complaints. And again, the judges are required to act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the judiciary. And they should not engage in extrajudicial activity that undermines their integrity. And I can tell you right now that there was a time when medical marijuana was just a theory and not on the books in places like Michigan. And I remember quite clearly when a judge from northern Michigan, the northern lower peninsula of Michigan, came down to a place called Pine Knob, or actually known as DTE Energy Music Theater, or something like that. But the old timers call it Pine Knob. It's an outdoor amphitheater. And so there is a stage and seats, and then a hill that you can sit on, grass seats, and national acts play there. I've seen the Allman Brothers there. I've seen the Beach Boys there. I've seen, a long time ago, I've seen Natalie Merchant there. I've seen the Psychedelic Furs there. I saw Talk there. I've seen the Bare Naked Ladies there, the band, not the group of people. I've seen a Blues Traveler there. And so there was a time when, all summer long, they have concerts there. Spring till the fall, they have concerts there. And I've often joked about going places and it smells like Pine Knob. And the joke, of course, is that Pine Knob being an outdoor music theater where a lot of bands play, a lot of people would occasionally smoke the wacky tobacco. And if it wasn't windy, the shape of the amphitheater would cause the smoke to kind of settle down. And it was true. You could sometimes be up on the hill and look down, and you could see the performers on stage because of the lights and whatnot. But you'd notice that there was like a certain haze rising above the audience, and it was not clouds. It wasn't cumulus nimbus clouds. It was actual marijuana and cigarette smoke, but largely marijuana smoke based on the smell. That's how I know what it smells like. I've never smoked this stuff. So I remember a famous story that was in the papers where some people from up north came down to Pine Knob to see their favorite band play, and they turned and looked, and there was a judge from their community over there smoking a big old, spliff, I think is what the kids called them back then. And they said, hey, that's the Honorable so-and-so smoking a joint. And it certainly looked like he was smoking something that was not rolled at a factory and sold from, factory in North Carolina or something. It was homegrown, as they say. And so somebody actually mentioned that, and word got out. And finally, I think somebody maybe even taken a picture. And the judge basically got in trouble for that. Back then, that was illegal. It was illegal. And he, I guess, assumed he was far enough away from home that nobody'd recognize him. And somebody did. So, you've got to be careful. And I've known a few judges, and I know that they elevate their game around the clock for the most part, because they recognize that when they go out in public, it's not, hey, there's Bob, my neighbor. That's the Honorable Bob, the judge. And they represent the judiciary wherever they go, whenever they go. They are the face of the judiciary, even when they're not wearing the robe, they're not sitting in court. I've bumped into judges out in public, So it's a little disconcerting. It's like when you bump into a teacher out in public or something, one of your kids' teachers or something. Out of context, there's this little moment. It's like, and hey, Your Honor, Steve Lehto, I'm an attorney. I was in front of you the other day. Oh, hey, how are you? But the point is that they have to be in their best behavior at all times. So I think I've used this analogy before. I'll use it again. I think that when you find yourself wrestling in the parking lot of a White Castle at 1 a.m. and you may or may not even be winning or losing the fight. Doesn't matter. As you're wrestling a stranger in the White Castle parking lot at 1 a.m., ask yourself, where did it all go wrong? I'm a judge. I get paid lots of money. I get to lock people up. I throw people in jail. I get to evict people from their homes. I have power. When I sit in a courtroom wearing the black robe I'm not wearing right now, I can bang my gavel and make things happen. Where did my life go so horribly wrong that right now I'm wrestling with a stranger in a White Castle parking lot at 1 a.m.? So there you go. 3 judges face ethics charges in White Castle shooting that injured 2. And the question is, of course, what sparked the confrontation? And deep down, it doesn't really even matter because it sounds like they could be getting in trouble. So I will update you as this story progresses. Questions or comments, please put them below. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Lehto's Law. And no, I'm not a robot.